For anybody who's new to Stan Gooch's work, I'm going to give a brief summary of what the hybrid origin theory is. Stan proposed that humans were a hybrid between two different species of pre-humans. So the two that he focused in on were Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal man. They had diverged from a common ancestor millions of years ago and had evolved on completely different paths. They'd been isolated in different parts of the world. One was in Africa, one was in India, and another type was in Borneo, the Borneo Peninsula, and that there was a type that lived in Europe which had become adapted to cold weather. Cro-Magnon had had a completely separate evolution and eventually encountered each of these types at various points. So the ones he focuses in on is the European Neanderthal, which is the red-haired, cold weather adapted Neanderthal. The meeting of these two was a sort of cataclysmic event because the two were completely different and had completely different lines of evolution, completely different morphology, so different skulls, different body types, bone structures. The Neanderthal was more of what you call the picnic body, which is the shorter, stouter body with the large chest. And the Cro-Magnon was the taller, more gracile structure. These features, such as skull and skeleton, are not something that's just whimsical or arbitrary. They've evolved for very good reasons, the same as a deer has evolved antlers. Cro-Magnon evolved the more jutting out chin for very good reasons, and the Neanderthals evolved the heavy brow ridge for good reasons. So the two came together, and that out of that encounter came the first humans. So these humans were the product of essentially rape between the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals. The Cro-Magnons overrunning the Neanderthals. We see the culture of Cro-Magnon. The tool culture comes and replaces the Neanderthal culture. So Neanderthal was using stone culture, which I believe was the Mousterian culture. And then Cro-Magnon comes in with the orignation. He's using tools that have been made out of other elements than stone, and he's sharpening these tools to be used for digging, to be used for excavating, for cutting, all sorts of things. Not that Neanderthal culture was in any way inferior. It was just a different culture. They'd come down a different line of evolution. But we do see a replacement of the culture. So we know that that Cro-Magnon came into, let's take Europe as an example. Neanderthal has existed in Europe for 250,000 years or thereabouts. We find fossils going back. Cro-Magnon appears around about 35,000 years ago and overruns Neanderthal for about 1,000 years until eventually Neanderthal creeps into the background. We won't say disappears, because he doesn't really disappear. He sort of is swallowed up by humans and by first Cro-Magnon and then by humans. And so the catastrophic side of this, so it's a good thing because humans came out of it. So this is the missing link that everybody's been looking for. There isn't a missing link. There's just a hybrid event, and that's where this combining of these two completely antagonistic sides coming together inside us is what creates the ingenuity of humans and the creativity and imagination that humans have. So it's a combination of the two sides, the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. But it's also, as well as being a blessing, it's a curse because it's seen as the fall. So this is the moment when man stopped being, when we stopped being animals and we moved into the next stage of being, as they put it in religious books, fallen. In the Bible, it's recorded as the sons of gods fell upon the daughters of the earth. So the sons of gods will be the Cro-Magnons, and the daughters of the earth will be the Neanderthals. And we are the hybrid event that came out of that. And then humans were brought up by Neanderthals. The mothers were all Neanderthals. But they knew there was something different about them. There was something unique that wasn't like either of the parent species that came before, and they went on to form their own groups that took over all of these other tribes and groups that had predated them, and eventually encountered Cro-Magnon again and either bred back in with Cro-Magnon or eradicated Cro-Magnon because they were more intelligent. The hybrid event created a much more intelligent being, which is humans. And the ramification of this event is that in our times we have this instinctive conflict in our heads all the time. We've inherited two sets of instincts. We've inherited the Neanderthals' instincts and we've inherited the Cro-Magnon instincts. One of the examples that Stan Gooch cites is the lovebirds. So there was a fisher's lovebird and a peach-faced lovebird. One of these lovebirds would tuck its nesting material under its wing and then take flight and go to the nest. And then the other type of lovebird would put the bedding material, nesting material in its beak and then fly off. But the hybrid of these two lovebirds would put the nesting material, tuck it in under its wing and then go to fly off and then realise that it didn't have it in its mouth, so it would take it out, put it in its mouth and then try to fly off and then realise it didn't have it under its wing. So it created a conflict within the bird that was detrimental to the bird, really. And the hybrid event in some ways has been detrimental to us because we live outside of nature now and we see ourselves as something other than an animal. But it's also been a blessing because we can, look what we've created around us. And we still find these two conflicting sides in our societies today. As this is as Stan put it, if you take any conflict in the world today, or most of the big conflicts, you can find these two sides still at war with each other. But actually, the war is inside us. So we contain both sides. Each of us contains both sides in different amounts. More Neanderthal, more Cro-Magnon. Different various levels of each. And that's what creates these conflicts. So even when you find something like the Protestants and Catholics, you'll find that one has more Cro-Magnon traits and one has more Neanderthal traits. Or let's say Israel and Palestine, you'll find that one is more one way, one's more the other way.